Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. It's Fran here, and I'm back with my Gaming 33 team selection. But just before I actually move into Gaming 33 and what I've decided to do transfer-wise or even free hit-wise, just a quick review in Gaming 32. So I did end up putting the captaincy on Son, which, as you all know, resulted in the green arrow. Fortunately, he had an astoundingly good week, and Spurs were able to score a lot of goals from very, very low kind of expected goal chances. So they were very, very great with their finishing that week. I think they were exceptionally good and probably a little bit, in a sense, overperformed really what they really should have created versus Aston Villa, because they weren't particularly good in the first half. Regardless, it was a huge benefit. And I think it was a nice week where in one where I made the transfer towards James because I thought Chelsea would have a great bounce back versus Southampton. I think the logic was there. But clearly the transfer didn't pay off because it seems like James was still going to be rested for the Real Madrid game, and the priority was clearly there, where he played a very great game in the Santiago Bernabeu in the end. Now we're put in a situation where, because he did play extra time versus Real Madrid, he is probably going to be quite tired. I don't know exactly what the situation is with him with the FA Cup versus Crystal Palace, but we won't get that sort of news and update before the transfer deadline. So I have to make a decision there, and I think given the amount of rest between the FA Cup game, them no longer being involved in Europe, I have to imagine that the Arsenal game is probably going to be seen as another game where he should be playing because he is part of Chelsea's best starting 11. And another thing to mention too with Chelsea going forwards is a lot of people have been talking about the implications of 33 and 34, with Chelsea maybe having a double game week if they win versus Crystal Palace. And clearly, I think I see it as an opportunity to move towards players like Mount or even Alonso, who actually really did excite me when he was playing versus Real Madrid in the Champions League. However, the big kind of red flag there was Doherty this week, where he did get injured, and that was very unfortunate because he could have picked up another clean sheet versus Aston Villa. Kulusevski is continuously a player who is almost like a slightly better Rafinha in that he is in a better team, and I think is someone who is constantly contributing on a week-to-week basis. He's been very consistent with points, not exactly the highest ceiling, but an extremely high floor. Barnes is someone who I regrettably probably actually involved in my team in Game Week 30. I had this decision between going for Barnes, going for Madison, and going for Saka. And it's very clear I think I've made the wrong one. He's not exactly a problem in the squad yet, but I don't think he's really excited in any particular performances. And it was evident in the PSV game when Leicester were actually chasing a game when they were 0-1 down, that they did substitute Barnes at halftime. And that kind of colors the picture when it comes to maybe Rodgers and how he rates Harvey Barnes at this moment in time. Rafinha, however, did have an exceptional week, but he does head into Game Week 33 with a blank and probably is going to be classified as the problem of the team this week because he has a lot of money hauled into him, and this is a week where we are looking towards either an Arsenal or Leicester player as a transfer. But that was pretty much my Game Week review. Another probably last but not least little comment on Weghorst. He was shocking. That's pretty much what it comes down to. His underlying stats are appalling. They're almost half that of expected goals when it comes down to the comparison to Wood. He hasn't had exactly the most amount of time. Sean Dyche has just been sacked. But I still think there's actually an opportunity where Weghorst could be on the bench because he just hasn't looked good. And I could see maybe a new manager or a new kind of set of staff coming in, because it doesn't seem like they have actually penciled in a permanent manager, putting him on the bench, really, where Jay Rodriguez could play instead of him, or even, Vidra could actually start ahead of him because he's just been that shocking. But that's pretty much where we find ourselves in Game Week 32. As we head on to Game Week 33, this is actually the team that I'm going to be rocking out for this week. As you can see, I've actually gone for the transfer of Martinelli into the team, and sort of confirming what I was saying with my statements, I really think Weghorst is a horrid option. Even in this double game week where he gets to play West Ham, who've just come back from Europe, and then also Southampton, who didn't look particularly good versus Chelsea. They kind of had their annual battering. A couple of years ago, it was Leicester, and so on and so forth. But for me, I just really don't see anything on the pitch that I like from Weghorst. The underlying data also supports the eye test as well. He's looked terrible. I don't really think the new management will improve things. I think Sean Dyche has always historically overperformed with Burnley with the lack of funds he's had available, and really I don't see how the new manager is going to bring something new out of Weghorst that I wasn't able to see in the last few weeks, because he just really didn't look exciting whatsoever. I think even when we look at the players who are susceptible of losing their clean sheet in terms of my defenders, when we talk about Reece James versus Arsenal or even Van Dijk versus United, I think they've both got great opportunities to keep clean sheets, or at least provide something from the attacking point of view that outscores Weghorst no matter what. And when I look at Weghorst, he really is that type of player who has a ceiling of 3 to 4 points. And perhaps I'll be wrong, perhaps I'll be going against the effective ownership, but I think that's just truly my opinion. And the transfer that I've made this week as a result is actually to move to Martinelli. Now, Martinelli did have a knock a few weeks back where he was rested versus Aston Villa, and since then he's had tapered minutes. It's slowly ramped up, and he played 73 minutes last game, and for me still continues to be one of the more lively players in this Arsenal team. And with the sort of injury updates, you have Odegaard moving slightly deeper and sometimes playing in the midfield now, as opposed to playing that kind of 10/cam position. And Saka also being a potential, starter always at left wing back now because of the situation with Nuno Tavares being slightly poor and Tierney just not being available for the rest of the season. That does mean that Martinelli might have to play a slightly more defensive role, but he has been just as lively, and I think the underlying data, even in the recent games and in his very limited minutes, have still been very, very positive, and that's what I like about Martinelli. He still seems like a very lively player, and he does pass the eye test for me. As I said, Barnes is someone who doesn't really do that. He's the opposite of Martinelli in that sense, where playing on the left, he just hasn't really excited whatsoever, but he does have 2 great games here, and also has been rested, so to speak. I don't really expect him to provide much, but he's not really a problem this week, and I still see him as having a higher ceiling, understandably, than someone like Weghorst. And that's pretty much what it comes down to. I still see, for example, Van Dijk having a clear opportunity of getting a goal versus United, potentially, or even just keeping the clean sheet, which is probably what I expect more so. And then James, as we saw, I think he has a perfect opportunity to actually capitalize on the fact that Tierney's not here. James on the right-hand flank has shown quite a little bit of good partnership where Ruben Loftus-Cheek has moved towards those sort of areas and allowed for Reece James to actually move a little bit more central, kind of like what Cancelo did and innovated with Pep tactically earlier in the season, where he's now able to take and crack a lot of shots as he usually was earlier on in the season. And I really like Reece James and that kind of fixture versus Arsenal where hopefully they're able to shut out this Arsenal team, even though I actually have Martinelli. What's interesting, though, I think, is that this Arsenal team have been very, very good versus Chelsea in the last few years. I think I wouldn't say they're necessarily a bogey team or whatever, but I think the games have always been high scoring and quite back and forth, and the head-to-head results actually do pan out in that favor. The only bad game really from Arsenal was the start of the season where they had a really poor run of form. They even, I think, they started the season losing to Brentford and just really weren't able to pick up form until the sort of period where Ramsdale actually joined the team, and slowly they started to build much more chemistry from the defense, and especially with the back four with Tomiyasu joining and Tierney kind of playing a much more flat role in the team. And then the reincorporation of players like Smith Rowe and Martinelli into the side as permanent fixtures has really improved the team, alongside Odegaard playing and finally finding basically his top form. So for me, this Arsenal team is still capable of scoring versus Chelsea. And as I said, I see it as a bit of a conflicting matchup, obviously, with James and Martinelli there. James is probably going to be tasked with defending Martinelli, but I still like the opportunity of Martinelli to do extremely well with the Southampton game, and I would still keep it open for him to do well in the second game and the subsequent game versus Chelsea. I actually think he would be a great captaincy shout if he wasn't so much of a minutes down, and I think I might go towards the deadline really thinking about either Martinelli or Salah as my captaincy options, and maybe even Son Heung-min as well. Son was actually shut out recently versus Brighton, I think, in a game where they did win 2-0. But I wouldn't actually put it past him to actually score. He's found his footing in the last 3 weeks, scoring pretty much week on week, with another hat-trick versus Aston Villa from very, very low chances, which is basically a hallmark of Son. And he's already outscored Son in open play this season. So it's very interesting to actually think about that. As I said, those are going to be my 3 sort of captaincy shouts this week, and I'll probably be making a decision towards Martinelli or I think Salah, just because the fixture seems a little bit more ripe for Salah when he's now tasked with dealing with Telej and Maguire on that sort of right-hand side of the United flank, or sort of the right-hand side of the Liverpool flank. And I really think they will overwhelm United once again in terms of the wing dominance with Trent and Salah. As far as Cancelo, he's a very safe pick. Same with Kulusevski. And with Broja, the reason why I've started him specifically over Weghorst is, even though they both have been relatively poor in terms of actual goal contribution, I have to say that the opposite can be said about Broja when it comes to how lively he has been as a player. I think on international duty, and also just in terms of how he's performed Southampton, I still think he is that active player that we looked at as definitely one of the interesting forwards to think about in the future. And for me, I think with Southampton hopefully receiving a little bit of a bounce back after getting absolutely demolished by Chelsea these are great games here, with Burnley also having Sean Dyche sacked and perhaps playing a little bit more open, where Broja could find a nice little way to actually find a goal scoring foray here after a very barren run. And that's pretty much how my team is set up. Very, very short team selection this week. There wasn't really much to really think about when it comes to this team selection, because for me, the deliberation was between either free hitting this week or just playing the safe play and going for an Arsenal player who I thought was probably going to be my biggest weakness. I had the option of going for Saka, but it did actually rely on me going for another transfer, and I don't really want to go for a -4, because as we know, with Game Week 33/34, you need to be looking at these Chelsea players or even City players to contemplate, because they have a great game, single game week, City-wise versus Watford, and then also Chelsea do have a double with United, where you probably want to be looking at options like Mount or even Alonso/Rudiger to back up either James or Rudiger, whoever of whom you have in your team at this point in time. And that's kind of the situation. I really think that setting my team up for that and going for Martinelli will actually free up some of the funds, so that maybe I can actually push up someone like a Barnes if he looks really terrible this week, to move into someone like a Mount, or maybe just simply move away from Van Dijk and once again continue to accumulate a bit of budget towards reaccumulating much more expensive midfielders as we head towards Game Week 36. But that's it for me for this week. I hope you guys have a wonderful week ahead, and I'll see you guys very, very shortly.